Dr. Kim Minji pushed through the thick green leaves of the forest. Her boots made soft sounds on the wet ground. The morning air was cool and filled with strange smells from plants she had never seen before. New Busan was a young colony world, and every day brought new discoveries. Minji carried her research bag over her shoulder. Inside were tools to study the animals and plants of this world. She had been working here for 2 years, but the forest still held many secrets. Today, she wanted to find the creature that had been leaving strange marks on the trees. The marks were different from anything she had seen before. They were not random scratches like most animals made. These marks seemed to follow a pattern. They were too organized to be accidental. Behind her, Lee Dae-ho tried to keep up. He was her research assistant and had been working with her for 6 months. He was young, but eager to learn about the alien life forms on their new world. "Dr. Kim," Dae-ho said, breathing hard. "Are you sure we should go this far from the colony?" Commander Park said the deep forest was dangerous. Mingi stopped walking and turned to face him. "Commander Park thinks everything is dangerous. If we listened to him, we would never leave the colony walls. How can we understand this world if we are afraid to explore it?" But she could see worry in his eyes. The colony had strict rules about going into the deep forest. Only research teams with military escorts were supposed to venture this far. But Mingi had convinced the administrators that her work was important enough to make an exception. They walked deeper into the forest. The trees grew taller and thicker. Less sunlight reached the ground. Strange sounds echoed through the branches. Above them, some were bird calls, but others were unfamiliar. After an hour of walking, Minji found what she was looking for. A huge tree stood in a small clearing. Its trunk was covered with the mysterious marks. But these marks were different. They were deeper and more complex than the ones closer to the colony. "Look at this," Minji said, taking out her camera. "These marks are not random. See how they form patterns? This is not just an animal scratching the bark. This is something else." Dae-ho came closer to examine the marks. "They do look strange, but what could make marks like this?" Before Minji could answer, the ground began to shake. Not like an earthquake, but like something very large was moving through the forest. The shaking grew stronger. Birds flew away from the trees, making loud alarm calls. "We should go back," Dae-ho whispered. But Minji was too curious. She had spent her whole life studying animal behavior. This was exactly the kind of discovery she had come to New Busan to find. She motioned for Dae-ho to be quiet and hide behind. The large tree, the shaking stopped. The forest became completely silent. Even the insects stopped making noise. This was never a good sign in nature. When all the animals went quiet, it meant a predator was near. Then she saw it. The creature was massive. It stood 3 meters tall at the shoulder. Its body was covered in thick, dark fur that seemed to absorb light. Its limbs were powerful and muscular. Its head was large with intelligent eyes that seemed to study everything around it. Most people would have seen a monster, something to fear and avoid. But Mingi had spent years studying animal behavior. She saw something different. The way the creature moved was careful and deliberate. It was not hunting or looking for food. It was exploring, just like she was. The creature approached the marked tree. It raised one massive arm and touched the marks with what looked like claws. But instead of making new scratches, it seemed to be reading the existing marks. Its head tilted as if it was thinking about what it saw. Minji held her breath. She had never seen behavior like this. The creature was not just touching the marks, it was studying them. This suggested a level of intelligence that no one in the colony had suspected. The creature stepped back from the tree and looked around the clearing. For a moment, its eyes met Minji's. She expected it to react with aggression or fear. Instead, it simply watched her with what seemed like curiosity. Slowly, carefully, Minji stood up from behind the tree. Dae-ho tried to pull her back down, but she gently pushed his hand away. The creature did not move away or show signs of alarm. It continued to watch her. Minji took a small step forward. The creature's ears moved slightly, but it did not retreat. She took another step. Still no aggressive reaction. This was remarkable. Most wild animals would either attack or run away when humans came too close. Dr. Kim Dae-ho whispered urgently. "What are you doing? Something incredible?" she whispered back. The creature made a low sound. Not a growl or roar, but something else. It sounded almost like it was trying to communicate. Minji had heard similar sounds from intelligent species. On other worlds, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small recording device. The creature watched her movements with interest. When she held up the device, the creature made the sound again. This time it was different, more complex. Minji played back the recording. The creature listened carefully, then made another sound. It was clearly responding to what it had heard. This was not random noise. This was an attempt at communication. For the next hour, Minji and the creature continued this simple exchange. She would play sounds, and it would respond with new sounds. Gradually, she began to notice patterns. The creature was not just making noise. It was trying to teach her its language. When the sun began to set, the creature made a final sound and turned to leave. Before it disappeared into the forest, it approached the marked tree one more time. Using its claws, it carefully added a new mark to the pattern. Then it looked at Minji and made a soft sound that seemed almost like a goodbye. After the creature left, Minji examined the new mark. It was different from all the others, smaller and more precise, almost like a signature. "We need to go back," Dae-ho said. "The colony will be worried." Minji nodded, but her mind was racing. She had just made contact with an intelligent alien species. This was the kind of discovery that could change everything. But she knew that convincing the colony leadership would not be easy. They saw the world in terms of threats and resources. They would not understand the importance of what had just happened. As they walked back through the forest, Minji made a decision. She would return to study this creature. She would learn its language and understand its behavior. No matter what the colony administrators said, she would not let fear stop her from making the most important discovery of her career. The creature had shown her intelligence and curiosity. It had tried to communicate with her in that moment of contact. She had felt something she had never experienced before. She had felt like she was meeting a kindred spirit, someone who shared her love of learning and discovery. She did not know it yet, but she had just met the being that would become closer to her than her own family. And that relationship would soon save not just her life, but the lives of everyone in the colony. 3 months had passed since Minji first met the creature in the forest. She had returned to the marked tree every few days. Each time the creature was there waiting for her. She had started calling it the Keth, a name that came from the sounds it made when trying to communicate. The relationship between them grew stronger with each meeting. At first, the Keth would stay far away and only make sounds. But slowly, it began to come closer. Now it would sit near her while she worked, watching everything she did with curious eyes. Minji had learned many things about the Keth. It was not just intelligent. It seemed to understand the forest in ways that amazed her. It knew which plants were safe to eat and which were dangerous. It could predict when storms were coming hours before her weather equipment detected them. Today was different. Minji was deep in the forest, farther than she had ever gone before. She was studying a group of strange flowering plants when she heard a sound that made her blood freeze. It was the growl of a ridge-cat, one of the most dangerous predators. On Nubusan, ridge-cats were huge, fast, and deadly. They hunted alone and could kill a human in seconds. Minji had never seen one, but she had heard the stories. 3 colonists had been killed by ridge-cats in the past year. The growl came again, closer this time. Minji looked around but could not see the cat. The forest was too thick. She reached for her emergency communicator, but her hands were shaking. Too much to operate it properly. Then she heard a different sound. It was the Keith, making a low, rumbling noise she had never heard before. The sound was not directed at her. It was directed at something else in the forest. The Keth appeared between Minji and the direction of the growling. It stood tall and made itself look as large as possible. Its fur was standing up, making it appear even bigger. The rumbling sound it made was deep and threatening. The ridge-cat emerged from the bushes. It was smaller than the Keth, but looked deadly. Its muscles were tight and ready to spring. Its eyes were fixed on Minji. but the Keth stepped forward, placing itself directly between Minji and the ridge cat. The rumbling sound became louder. The Keth was not backing down. It was protecting her. The ridge cat hesitated. It was used to being the strongest predator in the forest, but the Keth was bigger and showed no fear. The two creatures stared at each other for what felt like forever. Finally, the ridge cat turned and disappeared back into the forest. It had decided that hunting was not worth fighting the Keth. Mingi felt her legs become weak. She sat down on a fallen log, trying to control her breathing. The Keth approached her slowly and made a soft sound. It was the sound it made when it was concerned about something. "Thank you," Minji said, even though she knew the Keth might not understand her words. But it seemed to understand her tone. It made a gentle sound back and sat down near her. That was the moment everything changed. The Keth had not just protected her from danger, it had put itself at risk to keep her safe. This was not the behavior of a wild animal. This was the behavior of someone who cared about her. From that day forward, the Keth became her constant companion during field research. It would appear whenever she entered the forest. It would walk with her, showing her safe paths and warning her about dangers she could not see. The Keth taught her things about the forest that no human had ever known. It showed her which berries were safe to eat and which water sources were clean. It led her to caves when sudden storms came. It even showed her the best places to find rare plants for her research. In return, Mingi shared her knowledge with the Keth. She showed it her scientific instruments and explained what they did. The Keth was fascinated by her camera and recording equipment. It seemed to understand that she was documenting the forest just as it was. The communication between them became more complex. The Keth had a vocabulary of dozens of different sounds, each with a specific meaning. Minji learned to recognize the sound for danger, the sound for food, the sound for weather changes, and many others. But the most important sound was the one the Keth made when it saw her arrive each day. It was a sound of greeting and happiness. It was the sound of recognition between friends. One day, Minji brought Lee Daeho to meet the Keth. Daeho was nervous, but Minji assured him it would be safe. The Keth was cautious around Daeho at first, but when it saw that Minji trusted him, it accepted him as well. "This is incredible," Daeho said as he watched the Keth demonstrate its knowledge of the forest. "No one at the colony will believe this." Lee was right. When Minji tried to explain her discoveries to the colony leadership, they did not believe her. Commander Park Hyun thought she was taking too many risks. Administrator Bae Woojin was concerned about the time she was spending away from her official duties. "Dr. Kim," Commander Park said during a colony meeting, "you are describing behavior that suggests this creature is intelligent. But our scans show it has a primitive brain structure, maybe seeing patterns that are not really there." "I know what I have observed," Mingi replied. "This creature has saved my life multiple times, has shown me things about this world that we never could have discovered on our own. It is not just intelligent. It is trying to help us." "Animals can be trained to perform helpful behaviors," Bae Woojin said. "That does not make them intelligent. We need to focus on practical matters. The colony's survival depends on proper resource management, not on studying every creature we encounter." Minji felt frustrated. She had spent months building a relationship with the Keth. She had learned its language and earned its trust. But the colony leadership only saw it as an animal to be studied or avoided. "The Keth is not just an animal," she said. "It is becoming like family to me. It cares about my safety and has shown me kindness that many humans have not." The room became quiet. Commander Park and Administrator Bae exchanged glances. They clearly thought she was becoming too emotionally involved with her research subject. "Dr. Kim," Commander Park said carefully, "you may be losing your scientific objectivity. When researchers become emotionally attached to their subjects, it can cloud their judgment." "My judgment is clear," Minji replied. "The Keth is intelligent, helpful, and trustworthy. If we could learn to communicate with its species, we might gain valuable allies on this world." But she could see in their faces that they had made up their minds. They thought she was being foolish and reckless. They did not understand that. She had found something more valuable than any scientific discovery. She had found a friend. Only Communications Officer Choi Yuna seemed to believe her. After the meeting, Yuna approached her privately. "I have been monitoring your research reports," Yuna said. "The behavioral patterns you describe are consistent with advanced intelligence. I think you may be right about this creature." Minji said. "It means a lot to have someone believe me." "I will help you continue your research," Yuna promised. "But you should be careful. Commander Park is considering restricting your access to the forest." Minji nodded. She knew the risks. But she also knew that her relationship with the Keth was too important to abandon. The creature had become part of her life in a way she had never expected. It was her protector, her teacher, and her friend. She did not yet know that this friendship would soon be tested in ways she could never imagine. The Keth had been trying to tell her something important, but she had not yet learned enough of its language to understand the warning it was giving her. Something was coming to New Busan, something that the Keth remembered from the deep memories of its species. And when it arrived, the bond between Mingy and the Keith would be the colony's only hope for survival. The alarm bells in New Busan colony rang out across the settlement. It was a sound that every colonist feared. The long-range sensors had detected something approaching their star system. Something big. Communications Officer Choi Yuna ran to the command center, where Commander Park Hyun was studying the sensor readings. Her face was pale with worry. Commander Yuna said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The sensor array has identified the approaching ships. They are Valak vessels." Commander Park felt his stomach drop. Every human colony knew about the Valak Empire. They were one of the most dangerous alien races in the galaxy. They conquered worlds and enslaved the populations. No human colony had ever successfully fought them off. "How many ships?" Park asked. 15 warships, Yuna replied. "They will reach our system in 3 days." Park closed his eyes and tried to think. New Busan was a small colony with only basic defenses. They had a few patrol ships and some ground weapons, but nothing that could fight a Valak fleet. The colony had been built for farming and research, not for war. "Send a message to Earth immediately," Park ordered. "Tell them we need military support. Emergency priority." Yuna nodded and hurried to her communication station. But they both knew the truth. Earth was too far away. Even if the military responded immediately, help would not arrive for weeks. The Valak would be here in 3 days. Administrator Bae Woojin entered the command center. He had been in a meeting with the colony's department heads when the alarm sounded. "What is our situation?" Bae asked. "Bad," Park replied honestly. 15 Valak warships are approaching. We have no chance of fighting them off with our current defenses. "Then we evacuate," Bae said. "Load everyone onto the transport ships and leave the system." "We only have 4 transport ships," Park reminded him. "They can carry maybe half the colony population. And the Valak ships are faster than our transports. They would catch us before we could reach the next star system." The 3 leaders stood in silence, each thinking the same thing. New Busan was doomed. In 3 days, the Valak would arrive and destroy everything they had built. Thousands of colonists would die or be enslaved. Meanwhile, in the forest, Dr. Kim Minji was having her own crisis. The Keth had been acting strangely for weeks. It seemed anxious and kept making sounds she had never heard before. Today, its behavior was more extreme than ever. The Keth kept looking up at the sky and making urgent sounds. It would run a few steps in one direction, then stop and look back at Minji. It was clearly trying to tell her something important, but she could not understand what. "What is it?" Minji asked, using the simple sound language they had developed. "What are you trying to tell me?" The Keth made a complex series of sounds. Some of them were familiar, but others were completely new. It was frustrated that she could not understand. It kept repeating the same sounds over and over. Lee Daeho was with Minji, recording the Keth's behavior. He had never seen the creature so agitated. Dr. Kim Daeho said, "I think it is trying to warn us about something." But what could it be warning us about? Before Minji could answer, her emergency communicator crackled to life. It was Choi Yuna. "Calling from the colony. Dr. Kim, you need to return to the colony immediately. We have an emergency situation." "What kind of emergency?" Minji asked. Valak ships are approaching the system. Commander Park is calling all personnel back to the colony for emergency planning. Minji felt the blood drain from her face. But the Valak were one of the few alien races that humans truly feared. They were ruthless conquerors who showed no mercy to the worlds they attacked. She looked at the Keth, who was still making urgent sounds and looking at the sky. Suddenly, everything made sense. The Keth had been trying to warn her about the approaching danger. Somehow, it had known about the Valak ships before the colony's sensors detected them. "We have to go back," Minji told Deho. "The colony is in danger." But as they prepared to leave, the Keith blocked their path, made a sound that Mingi recognized as no or stop. Then it made other sounds that seemed to mean danger and death. The Keth was telling her that returning to the colony was dangerous, but that made no sense. The colony was the safest place during a crisis. The forest would be the first place the Valak would search for hiding humans. "I have to go back," Minji said to the Keth. "My people need me."
Ow.
The Keth made more urgent sounds. It seemed to be trying to explain something complex, but Minji's understanding of its language was still limited. She could only catch pieces of what it was trying to say. The sounds seemed to be about the Valak, about fighting, and about something that had happened before. But she could not put the pieces together into a complete message. "I am sorry," Minji said. "I cannot understand what you are trying to tell me, but I have to help my people." The Keth stepped aside, but it made a sound that seemed sad and worried. As Minji and Deho left the forest, the Keth followed them for a short distance, then stopped and made one final sound. It was a sound she had never heard before, but somehow she knew it meant goodbye. Back at the colony, the situation was getting worse. The Valak ships were moving faster than expected. They would arrive in 2 days, not 3. Commander Park had called a meeting with all the department heads. The main hall was packed with worried colonists who wanted to know what was happening. "We have limited options," Park announced. "We can try to evacuate some of the population, but we do not have enough ships for everyone. We can try to hide in the forest, but the Valak will find us eventually. Or we can try to fight, but our weapons are no match for their technology." "What about negotiation?" asked Dr. Shin, the head of the medical department. "Maybe we can convince them to spare the colony." "The Valak do not negotiate," Park replied. "They conquer or destroy. There is no middle ground with them." Minji raised her hand. "Commander, I think there might be something we do not know about this world. The Keth has been trying to warn me about this threat. It seems to know about the Valak." Park looked at her with frustration. "Dr. Kim, this is not the time for theories about your forest creature. We are facing a real military threat." "What?" "If the Keth knows something that could help us," Minji insisted. "What if there are things about this world that we have not discovered yet?" "Even if that were true," Park said, "we do not have time to figure out what an animal is trying to tell us. We need real solutions." Administrator Bay stood up. "I have made a decision. We will begin evacuating the most essential personnel tomorrow. The transport ships will take them to the next star system. The rest of us will hide in the forest and hope the Valak do not find us." The meeting broke up with most people looking terrified. They were about to lose their homes and possibly their lives, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Minji felt helpless. She knew that Keth was trying to tell her something important, but she could not understand its message. The creature had protected her and taught her about the forest. Now it was trying to warn her about the greatest threat the colony had ever faced. That night, Minji could not sleep. She kept thinking about the sounds the Keth had made. Some of them had been familiar, but others were completely new. It was as if the creature was trying to access memories or knowledge that it rarely used. She decided to return to the forest one more time. If the Keth really knew something about the Valak, she had to try to understand what it was trying to tell her. The colony's survival might depend on it, but when she reached the marked tree where she usually met the Keth, it was not there. For the first time in months, her friend was nowhere to be found. She called out using the sounds she had learned, but there was no response. The forest was strangely quiet, as if all the animals were hiding from something terrible that was coming. Minji returned to the colony feeling more worried than ever.
Oh.
The Valak ships were approaching, and her only source of hope had disappeared. She did not know that the Keth had not abandoned her. It had gone to wake up others of its kind. Others who carried the ancient memories of the last time the Valak had come to their world. The real battle was about to begin. Minji could not sleep. The Valak ships would arrive tomorrow, and her friend the Keth had disappeared. She kept thinking about all the sounds the creature had made, trying to understand what it was trying to tell her. At dawn, she made a decision. She would go back to the forest one more time. If the Keth was still trying to warn her about something, she had to find out what it was. Lee Daeho wanted to come with her, but Mingi told him to stay at the colony. Something happened to her. Someone needed to continue her research notes. The forest was eerily quiet as she walked toward the marked tree. Even the insects were silent. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. When she reached the clearing, she found the Keth waiting for her. But it was not alone. 3 other creatures stood with it, all similar in size and appearance. They were clearly the same species, but older looking. Their fur was darker, and their eyes held a depth that spoke of great age. The Keth saw her and made a sound of greeting. But then it made other sounds, more complex than anything she had heard before. The other creatures joined in, creating a symphony of communication that was far beyond anything she had imagined possible. Minji sat down on the ground and listened carefully. Slowly, she began to recognize patterns in the sounds. Some were familiar. From her months of communication with the Keth, others were completely new. But they seemed to be variations of sounds she knew. The eldest of the creatures approached her. It made a sound that seemed to mean listen or learn. Then it began what could only be described as a story. Through a combination of sounds, gestures, and simple drawings made in the dirt, the creature began to tell her about the past. Showed her images of the sky filled with ships like the ones approaching now. It showed her battles fought long ago. Showed her the Valak. Minji realized that these creatures had memories of the Valak from before. Their species had fought the Valak Empire in the past. The knowledge was passed down through generations, stored in the genetic memory of their kind. The eldest creature continued its story. It showed her how the Valak fought. They relied on their technology and their numbers, expected their enemies to be afraid and to fight in predictable ways. But the Keth species had learned to use the forest itself as a weapon. The creature led her to a section of the forest she had never seen before. Hidden beneath the thick vegetation were the remains of old structures. They were not buildings, but defensive positions carved into the rock and earth. They were perfectly designed to hide defenders while giving them clear shots at enemies. But this was only the beginning. The creature showed her tunnels that connected different parts of the forest. They were old but still solid, defending. Force could move through these tunnels without being seen by enemies above ground. The Keth made more sounds. Minji began to understand. These creatures were not just intelligent animals. They were the descendants of an ancient civilization that had successfully fought the Valak before. They had been hiding their true nature from the human colonists, watching and waiting. "Why did you not tell us about this before?" Minji asked, using the simple sounds they had developed. The eldest creature made a sound that seemed to mean fear or danger. Then it made other sounds that Minji interpreted as meaning that humans were not ready to know the truth. The Keth had been studying the humans just as Mingi had been studying them, but now the Valak were coming again. The Keth knew that the human colony would be destroyed unless something was done. They had decided to reveal their secret and offer their help. The creature led her deeper into the forest, showing her more hidden defenses. There were observation posts disguised as natural rock formations. There were weapon caches hidden in hollow trees. There were even underground chambers large enough to hide hundreds of people. Everything was designed to fight the Valak. The Keth ancestors had studied their enemies and built defenses specifically to counter Valak tactics. The forest itself was a massive trap waiting to be sprung. "This is incredible," Minji said. "We have to tell the colony about this." But the Keth made a sound that meant difficult or problem. The eldest creature began to show her why. It drew pictures in the dirt showing human leaders, and it made sounds that meant no, believe or refuse. The Keth knew that the colony leaders would not believe this story. They would think it was impossible or too dangerous to trust. The creatures had been hiding their intelligence for so long that revealing it now would seem like a trick. Minji realized the problem. She had been trying to convince the colony that the Keth was intelligent for months. Now she had to tell them that not only was it intelligent, but it was part of an ancient civilization that had fought the Valak before. I will make them believe. She said, I will show them the proof. The Keth made approving sounds. The eldest creature approached her and made a sound she had never heard before. It was deep and resonant, and it seemed to carry great meaning. The other creatures repeated the sound. Minji realized they were performing some kind of ceremony. She was being accepted as a member of their group. They were trusting her with their greatest secret. The journey back to the colony took 2 hours. The Keth came with her, along with one of the elder creatures. They stayed hidden in the forest while Mingi went to find Commander Park. She found him in the command center, staring at the sensor readings that showed the Valak ships getting closer. His face was grim with the knowledge that his colony was doomed. Commander, Minji said, I have important information about our defenses. Park looked up warily. Dr. Kim, we do not have time for theories about forest creatures. The Valak will be here in 18 hours. That is exactly why you need to listen to me, Minji said. The Keth species has fought the Valak before. They know how to defeat them. Park stared at her. What are you talking about? The creatures I have been studying are not primitive animals. They are the descendants of an ancient civilization. They have been hiding their true nature from us, but now they are willing to help us fight the Valak. That is impossible, Park said. Our scans show they have primitive brain structures. Your scans are wrong, Minji replied. Come with me. I will show you proof. Park hesitated. He had no time for wild theories, but he also had no other options. The colony was going to be destroyed anyway. What did he have to lose? Fine, he said. But this better be real. Minji led him to the edge of the forest where the Keth was waiting. When Park saw the massive creature, his hand moved instinctively to his weapon. It is safe, Mingi assured him. Watch. The Keth approached slowly and made a series of sounds. Then it walked to a nearby tree and used its claws to draw a detailed diagram in the bark. The diagram showed the current position of the Valak ships in orbit, their formation, and their likely landing sites. Park stared at the diagram in shock. It was more accurate than their own intelligence reports. The creature had somehow tracked the Valak fleet and understood their tactical movements. How is this possible? Park asked. They have been fighting the Valak for centuries, Minji explained. They know their tactics better than we do. They can help us win this battle. Keth made more sounds and gestured toward the forest. It was inviting them to see the hidden defenses that its ancestors had built. Park looked at the diagram again, then at the intelligent eyes of the creature. For the first time since the Valak ships had been detected, he felt a spark of hope. Me, he said. The next few hours changed everything. Park saw the hidden tunnels, the defensive positions, and the weapon caches. He realized that the forest was not just a place to hide from the Valak. It was a fortress designed specifically to destroy them. But more importantly, he saw that the Keth were not just intelligent. They were experienced warriors who had been preparing for this moment for generations. They had the knowledge and the weapons to turn the tables on the Valak invasion. By the time they returned to the colony, Park was a changed man. He called an emergency meeting of all department heads and key personnel. We have new intelligence about the Valak threat, he announced, and we have new allies who can help us fight them. The room erupted in questions and disbelief, but Park was ready with answers. He had seen the proof with his own eyes. The Keth were not just animals. They were the key to saving the colony. The real battle was about to begin. For the first time, the humans had a chance to win. The Valak ships arrived at dawn, their dark hulls blocking out the morning sun. 15 massive warships hung in the sky above New Busan, like black clouds of death. Their weapons began charging with an ominous hum that could be heard even on. The ground commander Park stood in the colony's command center, watching the enemy ships on his screens. But unlike yesterday, he was not filled with despair. He had spent the night learning about the Keth defenses and planning the colony's response. All civilian personnel are in the underground shelters, Communications Officer Choi Yuna reported. The Keth have shown us tunnels we never knew existed. Everyone is safely hidden, Goodpark replied. What about our defensive positions? The Keth elders have positioned their warriors throughout the forest, Yuna said. They know exactly where the Valak will try to land. Dr. Kim is with them, serving as our liaison. Park nodded. It still felt strange to be working with alien creatures, but he had seen their intelligence and their knowledge of Valak tactics. They were the colony's only hope. The first orbital bombardment began at sunrise. Beams of energy struck the colony's main buildings, turning them into smoking ruins. The Valak were trying to destroy the colony's infrastructure and demoralize the defenders, but Park had expected this. Following the Keth's advice, he had moved all essential equipment to hidden locations in the forest. The buildings being destroyed were mostly empty. Phase 1 is complete, Park announced over the communication system. The Valak think they have weakened us. Now they will send ground forces to finish the job. Through the forest, the Keth warriors heard Park's words through the communication devices Mingy had given them. They understood the plan. The real battle was about to begin. The Valak landing ships descended from orbit like falling stars. They were heavily armored and bristling with weapons. Each ship carried 50 Valak soldiers, genetically enhanced warriors, bred for conquest. The ships landed in the clearings that the Keth had predicted they would use. The Valak commanders thought they had chosen safe landing sites, but they had walked directly into a trap that had been prepared centuries ago. The first Valak soldiers emerged from their ships, scanning the forest with their advanced sensors. They were tall, armored beings with 4 arms and reptilian features. Their weapons could cut through steel, and their armor could deflect most human weapons. But the Keth had not built their defenses to fight humans. They had built them to fight the Valak. The attack began with a sound that made the ground shake. It was the roar of the Keth, but not just 1 or 2 creatures. It was dozens of them, calling out from hidden positions throughout the forest. Sound was coordinated. It's designed to confuse and disorient the Valak forces. The Valak soldiers tried to locate the source of the sounds, but the forest seemed to be alive with threats they could not see. Their sensors detected movement everywhere, but they could not identify specific targets. Then the first blow was struck. A Valak patrol was moving through what appeared to be an empty section of forest when the ground beneath them suddenly collapsed. They fell into a pit that had been carefully concealed with branches and leaves. But this was not just a simple trap. The pit was filled with Keth, warriors who had been waiting patiently for hours. The Valak soldiers were strong and well-armed, but they were not prepared for the ferocity of the Keth attack. The creatures fought with a combination of intelligence and savage determination that the Valak had never encountered before. Within minutes, the entire patrol was eliminated. The Keth warriors climbed out of the pit and disappeared back into the forest, leaving no trace of their presence. This was just the beginning. Throughout the forest, similar ambushes were taking place. The Keth used their knowledge of the terrain and their understanding of Valak tactics to strike where the enemy was weakest. The Valak commanders were confused. Their intelligence had told them that this world was defended by a small human colony with primitive weapons, and not expected to face an organized resistance that seemed to know their every move. "Report," demanded General Korvac, the Valak commander, as he watched his forces take casualties from an enemy they could not see. "The defenders are using guerrilla tactics," his aide reported. "They appear to have detailed knowledge of our standard operating procedures. They are striking our weak points and avoiding our strengths." "Impossible," Korvac growled. "These are humans. They have no experience fighting us." But even as he spoke, another of his patrols was being eliminated by a perfectly coordinated Keth ambush. The creatures were not just fighting randomly. They were executing a battle plan that had been refined over centuries of conflict with the Valt. In the forest, Dr. Kim Minji crouched beside the elder Keth, watching the battle unfold. The creature had given her a communication device that allowed her to coordinate between the human defenders and the Keth warriors. "The Valak are sending reinforcements to Sector 7, she reported through her radio. They are trying to establish a command post near the old mining facility. The elder Keth made a series of sounds that Minji had learned to interpret as tactical instructions. The creature was directing its warriors with the skill of a master strategist. Understood, Minji said, moving Keth teams to intercept. Had become more than just a translator. She was serving as a bridge between two species that were fighting together for the first time in centuries. The trust that she had built with the Keth, over months of patient communication, was now being used to coordinate a battle for survival. The Valak. Reinforcements never reached their destination. They were ambushed in a narrow canyon by a combined force of Keth warriors and human defenders. The humans used their advanced weapons to disable the Valak vehicles, while the Keth used their intimate knowledge of the terrain to attack from unexpected angles. General Korvac watched his forces being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to anticipate his every move. This was not how Valak conquests were supposed to go. You were supposed to overwhelm primitive defenders with superior technology and numbers. Sir, his aide reported, we have lost contact with 6 patrol groups. Our landing sites are under constant attack. The enemy seems to know exactly where we will be and when we will be there. Korvac studied the tactical display, trying to understand how his invasion was failing so badly. The defenders were using tactics that were specifically designed to counter Valak strategies. It was as if they had been studying Valak military doctrine for years. Pull back all ground forces, he ordered. Regroup at the primary landing site. We will concentrate our forces and push through their defenses with overwhelming firepower. But the Keth had anticipated this move as well. As the Valak forces began to withdraw, they found their retreat routes blocked by fallen trees and rock slides. The forest itself seemed to be working against them. The withdrawal became a rout. Valak soldiers found themselves trapped in killing zones where hidden Keth warriors picked them off one by one. The creatures moved through the forest like shadows, striking without warning and disappearing before the Valak could respond. By midday, General Korvac had lost half his ground forces. The survivors were trapped in a small perimeter around their landing ships, surrounded by an enemy they could not see or effectively fight. This is impossible, Korvac muttered, staring at the reports of his losses. How can primitive defenders be defeating the elite forces of the Valak Empire? He did not know that he was not fighting primitive defenders. He was fighting the descendants of an ancient civilization that had been preparing for this moment for generations. The Keth had turned the forest into a weapon, and they were using it with deadly effectiveness. In the command center, Commander Park watched the tactical display with amazement. The Keth were not just helping the colony defend itself. They were completely destroying a Valak invasion force that should have been unstoppable. The Valak are requesting reinforcements from their fleet, Una reported. They are also preparing to begin heavy orbital bombardment of the forest. Park nodded grimly. The first phase of the battle was over, and the defenders had won a stunning victory. But the Valak still had their ships in orbit. They could destroy the entire forest if they became desperate enough. Contact Dr. Kim, Park ordered. Tell her that the Valak are about to escalate. Ask the Keth if they have any defenses against orbital bombardment. In the forest, the elder Keth heard Park's message and made a sound that Minji had learned too. Recognized as satisfaction, the creature had been waiting for this moment. The Valak were about to learn that the forest held more surprises than they had imagined. The real battle was just beginning, and the Keth were ready to show the Valak why. Their ancestors had learned to fear this world. The Valak orbital bombardment began at sunset. Beams of energy struck the forest, turning ancient trees into pillars of fire. General Korvac was determined to destroy the defenders, even if it meant burning the entire forest to the ground. But as the energy beams struck the forest, something unexpected happened. The beams seemed to lose their power as they passed through the canopy. What should have been devastating blasts became weak pulses that barely scorched the ground. What is happening? Korvac demanded, staring at the tactical display in confusion. Why are our weapons not working? His weapons officer checked the systems frantically. All weapons are functioning normally, sir. Energy's being dissipated. Somehow it is as if the forest itself is absorbing our attacks. Deep in the forest, the elder Keth made a sound of satisfaction. The trees around them were not ordinary trees. They were the descendants of plants that had been genetically modified centuries ago to absorb and deflect energy weapons. The entire forest was a living shield. Dr. Kim Mengi watched in amazement as the Valak bombardment failed to penetrate the forest's defenses. The Keth had not just built physical fortifications, they had turned the ecosystem itself into a weapon of war. "Is this possible?" she asked the elder Keth. The creature made a series of sounds that explained how its ancestors had modified the forest over generations. Every tree, every plant, every part of the ecosystem had been designed to protect the world from Valak attacks. "We need to tell Commander Park," Minji said into her radio. "The forest is protecting us from orbital bombardment. We can continue the ground battle." In the command center, Park received the message with disbelief. "The trees are stopping their orbital weapons." "How is that scientifically possible?" "I do not know," Yuna replied. "But our sensors confirm it. The Valak energy beams are being absorbed by the forest canopy. They are not reaching the ground with full power." Park shook his head in wonder. Every time he thought he understood the Keth, they revealed new capabilities. These creatures had turned their entire world into a fortress General Korvac was facing. His first major defeat in 20 years of conquest. His ground forces were trapped and dying. His orbital weapons were ineffective. Defenders seemed to know his every move before he made it. "Sir," his aide reported, "we are receiving distress calls from all ground units. They are requesting immediate evacuation." Korvac studied the tactical display one more time. His invasion force was being systematically destroyed by defenders that his intelligence had dismissed as primitive. He had two choices: continue fighting and lose his entire army, or retreat and face the shame of defeat. "Begin evacuation of all ground forces," he ordered reluctantly. "Prepare the fleet for immediate departure." But the Keth were not finished with the Valak. As the evacuation ships descended to pick up the surviving soldiers, they were met by a new surprise. The forest itself seemed to come alive with flying creatures that Minji had never seen before. They were not birds, but Keth variants that had adapted for flight. They had been sleeping deep in the forest, waiting for this moment. Now they emerged in massive swarms, attacking the Valak evacuation ships with coordinated precision. The flying Keth were not large individually. They attacked in groups of hundreds. They knew exactly where the Valak ships were vulnerable. They targeted the engine systems and weapon arrays with surgical accuracy. One by one, the Valak evacuation ships were brought down. The surviving soldiers on the ground watched in horror as their rescue was destroyed by creatures they had never seen before. "All evacuation ships are down," the aide reported to General Korvac. "The ground forces are trapped." Korvac realized that he was facing a complete military disaster. The defenders had not just repelled his invasion, they had destroyed his entire ground force and prevented any possibility of rescue. "Signal surrender," he ordered, his voice bitter with defeat. "Request terms from the defenders." In the forest, the elder Keth heard the Valak surrender through the communication devices. The creature made a sound that Minji recognized as victory, but also as sadness. Many lives had been lost on both sides. "They want to surrender?" Mingi reported to Commander Park. "What are your terms?" Park thought carefully. The Valak had come to destroy the colony, but they had been defeated by an alliance between humans and Keth. This was an opportunity to send a message to the entire Valak Empire. "Tell them they can leave," Park said. "But they must spread word throughout their empire that this world is under the protection of the Kith. Any future attacks will be met with the same fate." The elder Kith made approving sounds when it heard these terms. The creature understood the importance of reputation in warfare. If word spread that the Valak had been defeated here, other potential invaders would think twice before attacking. The surviving Valak soldiers were escorted to their ships under guard. They were allowed to repair their vessels and leave the system, but they were required to take detailed records of their defeat back to their commanders. As the last Valak ship disappeared into space, the forest erupted in celebration. The Keth made sounds of joy that echoed through the trees. It had protected their world once again. They had gained new allies in the process. Dr. Kim Mingi stood in the clearing where she had first met the Keth months ago. The creature approached her and made a sound she had never heard before. It was complex and beautiful, filled with meaning that went beyond words. What does it mean? She asked Lee Daeho, who had been studying the Keith language intensively. Translated, it means sister of the forest, or family of the trees. You have been given a formal name in their language. Minji felt tears in her eyes. She had gained more than just the respect of an alien species. She had been accepted as family by creatures who had saved her entire world. In the days that followed, everything changed. The Keth emerged from hiding and began open communication with the human colony. They shared their knowledge of the forest, their technology, and their history. The colony learned that they had been living under the protection of an ancient civilization for years without knowing it. The Keth had been watching them, studying them, and ultimately deciding that they were worth saving, Commander. Park worked with the Keth elders to establish formal diplomatic relations. The colony would continue to exist, but now it would be part of a larger alliance. The humans would contribute their technology and knowledge, while the Keth would provide protection and wisdom. Administrator Bei Wu-jin oversaw the integration of Keth knowledge into the colony's infrastructure. The creatures knew secrets about the planet that would take human scientists decades to discover on their own. Communications. Officer Choi Yuna established a translation center where humans could learn the Keth language and Keth could learn human languages. The two species began to truly understand each other for the first time. Dr. Kim. Minji became the first human ambassador to the Keth Collective. She spent her days working with the elders to establish protocols for cooperation between the species. Her patient work in building trust with a single Keth had become the foundation for an alliance between civilizations. The Keth revealed that they had been hiding their true nature for centuries, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. They had been studying the humans since the colony was established, learning about their character and their intentions. Why did you decide to trust us? Minji asked the elder Keth during one of their diplomatic meetings. The creature made a sound that meant, because you trusted us first. It explained that Minji's willingness to approach the Keth without fear, to learn its language, and to treat it as family had shown the Keth that humans were capable of true friendship. The alliance between humans and Minji's Keth transformed New Busan from a vulnerable frontier colony into a powerful fortress world. Other human colonies began sending representatives to learn about the partnership. The Keth shared their knowledge of defensive strategies and ecosystem management, but more importantly, the alliance sent a message throughout the galaxy. The Valak Empire spread word of their defeat, warning other aggressive species that New Busan was not to be attacked. The world became known as a place where different species could live together in harmony and mutual protection. Dr. Kim Mingi often returned to the clearing where she had first met the Keth. The creature would meet her there. They would share the simple pleasure of friendship that had grown into something much larger. She had referred to the beast as family, when everyone else saw only a dangerous animal. They had doubted her wisdom and questioned her judgment. But when the first blow was struck in the battle for their world, it was that family bond that saved them all. The Keth had taught her that intelligence and wisdom could be found in unexpected places. In return, she had taught them that not all humans were threats to be feared. Together, they had built something new, a partnership between species that proved cooperation was stronger than conquest. New Busan became a beacon of hope in a galaxy too often divided by fear and mistrust. It was a place where different species could work together, learn from each other, and build a better future for everyone. The beast had become family. Family had become an alliance. And the alliance had become a new way of living among the stars.